I've said it before, and I'll say it many times before we finish, that Excel treats the contents of a cell and the formatting of a cell as two independent entities, allowing you to control one without affecting the other. And we're going to see that demonstrated right now. I'll click in cell B2 and just paint it blue. And then I'm going to type the word stuff inside. Okay, so the stuff is the content and the blue is the format. Now I can easily just hit delete and delete the stuff, leaving the format behind. That's pretty obvious. It's not likely that you'll miss the fact that there's blue formatting on that cell. But let's take the cell underneath it here. And now I'm going to type in stuff here, Control Enter, and then I'm just going to change the font color to red. All right, now I've got formatting, that's the red, and the stuff, that's the content. When I hit delete on the keyboard, the stuff disappears and it looks like the formatting is gone too. But you know what? As soon as I type something else inside the cell, it comes back as red. What that tells us is that the formatting has stayed behind, even though we may have deleted the contents of the cell. To that end, formatting on a cell is like gum on the bottom of your shoe. It's hard to get off. It stays stuck there. Even though you might delete the contents of a cell, the formatting is still there. Now, there are some things that are pretty obvious. The fill color, like the blue, is obvious. But there's a whole catalog of things that don't show up until there's content for it to interact with. For example, I could take this entire column here, column D, and format it with, well, let's do the accounting format. From the number group, just click on the little $sign. We can't see anything special has happened here, but in fact now when I type a number in, we'll just type in a 2 and hit enter, you're going to get a $sign and a decimal point and 2 zeros. In fact, the entire way to the bottom of the worksheet, column D is now formatted with that accounting style. So the question arises, if you can't just delete the formatting by deleting the contents of the cell, how in the world do you get rid of it? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Let's go over to the blue cell, and I'm going to type stuff in there again, and Control Enter. Remember, Control Enter allows us to stay in the active cell without moving the active cell down. Then in the Home tab, Editing Group, we're going to click on the Clear button, and this is going to give us several choices for dealing with the contents and the formatting of our cell. We have Clear All, which is going to remove the formatting and the content. We have Clear Formats, which will just remove the blue. We have Clear Contents, which would just remove the stuff. That's the same as hitting delete on the keyboard. And then the other two things, Clear Comments and Clear Hyperlinks, don't really care about those just yet. So let's just try the Clear Formats and see what happens. And sure enough, we leave the stuff behind, but the blue formatting disappears. Well, how about over here in cell D2? What happens if we clear the format here? Well, we're going to leave the 2 behind, removing the $signs and the decimal points. If you're working in Excel 2003, you'll find a similar option if you go to the Edit menu and then click Clear. There's another fundamental about formatting that we'll have to talk about before we get into working with the specific tools, and that is that formatting is simply window dressing on a cell. It doesn't really affect the value that's typed into the cell. We can see that demonstrated here if I type in some numbers with decimal points. I'll do 5.9, 4.8, 3.7, and let's do 4.7. And look at that. There's that red formatting still left behind before. I call that a booby trap. If you formatted a cell ahead of time and then you repurpose the worksheet without removing the formatting, you might be surprised when you type something in a cell and come up with something like this red one. You could be shaking your head going, well, I don't know how that happened. It's easy enough to fix. If you want to clear all the formatting from the worksheet, click on the Select All button right here. This selects the entire worksheet. Then click the Clear button and then choose Clear Formats. Over in column C, I'm going to type a 6, a 5, a 4, and a 5. And then I'm going to put in a sum function that adds these two columns up. We'll shotgun this in using one of the methods we saw in our Auto Sum button lesson. So we'll select all the cells, including the blank cells below them, and then just hit the Auto Sum button to fire in the formula. And just to keep track of the formula, we're going to select these cells, and I'm going to use the fill color to color those yellow. All right, we're not going to miss those. Now watch this. I'm going to select just this group of cells right here, not the formula now, just the cells with the decimal points, and I'm going to go over to the number group. And here I'm going to use the Decrease Decimal button. This is going to round these numbers up. Now everything that you see here in the number group is a format. Remember I said a few seconds ago that when you apply formatting to a cell, it simply applies window dressing to the cell. It doesn't actually change the values that the cells contain. Here we can see this plainly. Down here at the bottom of the column, the sum function is still returning a 19.1, the same formula result it displayed before we rounded these numbers up. And over here we have, looks like the same numbers, and when you add them up, they come up to 20. Well, nobody in their right mind would ever think that 19.1 and 20 were the same thing, even though these two numbers, these two, and these two, and these two, look the same. Well, obviously there's something going on here, and we can't really tell until we look in the formula bar at each of these cells. So let's click in cell B2 and look in the formula bar. Here we can see the actual value in that cell is 5.9. The next one down is 4.8. The next one is 3.7, and the next one's 4.7. These are the same values that I typed in originally. So what's happened is we've applied window dressing to these cells. We've made them look like something that they're not really. Somebody might say that's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig underneath, even though it looks awful pretty. This is just something we need to be aware of before we turn in an important report to the boss, only to discover that our numbers don't add up properly. This concept is true of any one of the commands that you use from either the font group, the alignment group, or the number group, or any of these styles. Any formatting you apply to a cell is simply window dressing. Now that we understand that, let's move on and see how to work with the specific tools.